Welcome back. Another episode of RX Radio. Uh, Joining me today on the show is the guy who's always joining me every time, whether it be actually or in spirit, Dr. Jordan Jiunta, back on the program, as it were. So Jay and I take a little bit of a different approach. I know we've had a handful of interviews coming through on the Monday, Wednesday episode. Thought we'd kick it old school with the original. If you guys haven't been following the podcast for a while, it's been a while. Sorry, taking a drink. Jay and I started the podcast together back in 2016-ish. I don't know, a handful of hundreds of episodes later. Here we are still figuring shit out. So Jay and I go through sort of our journeys in navigating the social media fitness business space. And we have derived the holy book, the commandments of social media and how to not be a dick on the internet. And maybe how that might benefit you in business. So huge shout out to Jay for always making the time. He owns a company, so he just tends to do that because he's a diligent business owner and my closest friend on the planet. So hi, Jay, if you're listening. You're not. And I will see you and all of the friends listening in California in a few weeks at Mind Pump Studios, guys. Enjoy the episode. We'll talk to you next week.
You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Where was the first piece of fitness advice that you got? Do you remember? Like, who was your first training influence?
Ooh, I mean, honestly, it was my father. Like training at home, it was always like we had a gym in our basement, one of those like multi-units. We can do like bench press on one side, then like curls and we'll have pull downs. But like actually going to the gym, it was one of the best wrestlers that my high school had ever seen. His father, he was going through high school at the same time as me, and his father trained like a group of the wrestlers. And I was, we'll say at the time, lucky enough to get in with training with them. And that was basically my first strength coach. And we did 3 workouts a week, full body, full send on everything, probably about 18 different exercises, 3 sets of 10 on each. It was insane.
So, I mean, there's looking back now, and I've found my training career to be very circuitous. Like I train closer to the way I trained when I was 18 now as
Interesting.
33, or I try to anyway. And I feel like if I didn't stop training the way I did when I was 18 and I trained like that all the way through, I'd probably be way more resilient than I am. I feel like a lot of my dents in the fender. Now, some have gone from going to full send on other parts of my life, because if you think about being 16 years old and the level of responsibility that you do not have as a human being, send. Yeah. The answer is circle C, send always. Because like, dude, recoverability capacity, especially when God comes down with like the greatest cycle of all time, like just that pharmaceutical grade good, like come on, dog. Like just send. Gassed. But if you think like, all right, 3 days a week, you're still you're probably sleeping for 10. Dude, I used to be a fucking panda bear. Are you joking me?
Yeah.
I remember I didn't eat, I grazed like a cow. Like I would wake up and I would just like, I would take a bar stool from the kitchen and put it in front of the open door of the fridge.
That's amazing.
And I would have utensils in my hand. I would have a fork, a knife, and a spoon. I would have them on my lap, and I would just reach into the fridge. What's this? And like, do I need a tool to put this in my face? No. And I would just take the contents of the fridge and put it in my face. And dude, I just fucking grew like a motherfucker. And then I was like, oh, I'm tired from eating now. And I would just saunter my fucking ass up the stairs and go back to bed. Now it sucks. Like now I sleep fucking 4 hours a night on a good night. Yeah. But like back then, and I've just been trying to get back home ever since, dog. My training career is just, but here's the thing. And I think there's, you brought up your father as your first training influence. Now, for those of you who don't know, the legend that is Big Papa Jiunta. I mean, like all time.
Yeah. He's the man. He's the fucking man.
I mean, education background, nails, experience background, and he's jacked as fuck. So like, people really underestimate how much of a leg up that first touch point in fitness is. That really shapes your your training views, and those become really hard to break. So mine was friend of the show, Luke Bernatchez. Those of you guys who kind of been around me know Luke really well, one of my closest friends on the planet. And he was like my first training influence. He to this day is one of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to resistance training. He's still a guy that'll float stuff by me that I was like, holy shit, dude. Like, yeah, fuck, that makes a lot of sense. And so I kind of had like a leg up from the gate. And I think one of the reasons that we had a leg up was there wasn't a lot. It was hard to find information, right?
Yeah.
Like it was hard to find good information. So you had to go through guys that had made mistakes and learned the hard way. That was really the only way, whether it was Luke, whether it was your dad. Like, you know what? I listened to the stuff Luke used to do. Jesus. I'm sure your dad, just given how insane he is in the best way possible, probably made some crazy training mistakes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, homeboy has earned his scars, but we get to benefit from that. Now, the problem now is like most people's first touch point as far as like a fitness mentor, if you will, is online. These are digital touch points. They're not face to face. There's no more basement, weed or York barbell gym setup. It's following a social media account. And like I had, and you had, the unique ability to appraise people by one criteria. Is this person bigger than me? Yeah. If yes, shut up. And look, I was like, I'm not a small kid. Like before I really got into training, I like sprung up one summer before I started working out. And if someone was smaller than me, I was not going to listen to them. Now, not to say that's the only criteria, but in this world, I'm definitely leaning more towards that. Like my goal has never been to be right. When I got into training, my goal was to never be right. My goal was to be fucking huge. And that was what right was. But now it's like, I feel for the 16-year-old kids because like, I don't know, I was pretty impressionable. I was talking to PhD, Dr. Dean St. Marth the other day. And you guys will have heard the episode. If not, go back and listen to it. And Dean and I were reminiscing on the dumb shit we believed when we were kids. Like, do you remember some of like either the supplements you've taken or the training things you did or the way that you ate food that were like, oh, like I was a practitioner of the broest of bro science ever. Like, do you have any memories of like, man, I used to do this for training? Or
man, it's hard to think back, but I mean, the big things were like you never ate soybean anything because it was. Yeah. I think the technical term was going to give you bitch tits.
Really? We used another word. It was going to change your preference in sexual partners. That was literally like we're making that as PC as possible. But yeah, if you were eating soybeans, soy sauce, soy milk.
Yeah. That's a no-go. Yeah.
UHS, I think, was the acronym that floated around for a bit. Yo, check out Soy Boy over here. Like, careful. Don't get changed in the gym class around this motherfucker. Him and his soy milk. Oh, bad.
Yeah, no, that was a big one. Outside of that, dude, I probably ate as much as you ate. Like, I'm not as big as you, and I'll never be as big as you. But I want to be as big as you. and I'm going to do everything in my power to try and get there. So it's like, for me, it was just like taking whatever supplement I could to try and get bigger, regardless of if it worked or not. So like those 5-pound bags with the Sandcastle scoopers of mass gainer, mixing those and whole milk and peanut butter. It was just as many calories as I could get.
Were you an alarm clock in the middle of the night guy?
So not an alarm clock, but I would like habitually wake up in the middle of the night and drink whole milk. Like if I got up, that's what I would do.
It's so funny because I look back at that now and I literally think of like how that would make me feel and undoubtedly how it made me felt. And I literally just think of the scene in Anchorman where it's like 100 degrees outside. He's running in a suit and he's drinking. We're like, oh, milk was a bad choice. Like how the next scene wasn't you just like sitting over your kitchen sink, just going like, oh my God, why the fuck did I just do that?
Yeah, I think...
Just going back an immunity.
Yeah,
dude, that's insane. No, I think the correct term is an ulcer. I think that's what the correct term. Like the idea that I would sit like and the thing is like you probably felt great. Like the fact that your body was just like, okay, sure. And then back to bed. Oh my God, I'd sit up there. I'd literally be sitting up with heartburn for the next like 4 hours. God, how does fucking Santa Claus do this? This son of a bitch with iron stomach.
Yeah, 20 years later.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
times. Go ahead.
Well, I just remember, I was talking about this the other day, the pre-workout nano vapor. Do you remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like it had some like heat map of the body, like it was on some Jason Bourne stuff, and I was like, look, well, the one after has a lot of red on it. So I'm assuming that's good. And there was a disclaimer on the logo or on the container that you shouldn't keep the container open for more than 15 seconds. So we talked about this on this Dean St. Martin podcast, but it was literally like me and my buddy Jacob Patterson, because my mom didn't want me to have pre-workout. It's like, oh, Mom, sorry. Like, it's going to get a lot worse. And so we had to keep the pre-workout. We'd get our money together and we'd go down to GNC and we would get a locker in the tech hallway. It's like where all like the, I don't know, kind of like the derelict kids who smoked cigarettes at the back fence had their lockers for whatever reason. And so we would just took a random locker, we put a lock on it. And then after school every day, we would go there and there's literally just a solitary tub of whatever pre-workout we could afford. And one of the times it was nano vapor. And looking back, it's like, God, I was fucking stupid. Like, I'm so glad, like the idea that I'm not hooked on some sort or dead, but like hooked on some sort of drug where like the stuff you believed that didn't kill you, dude, I could have been like, someone could be like heroin. I was like, yeah, okay. Cause I believed that if you kept this tub open for more than 15 seconds, the gains left. Like, I don't really know what, but dude, we would sit there and it would be like orchestrated. Like, okay. Like it was like getting a Murtaugh off the toilet in Lethal Weapon 2. We're like, okay, hold on, 1, 2, 3, and then go, or like 1, 2, 3, you open, I scoop. Like it was insane. Like that was one that I remember. And it's like, but thank God, like that was the only thing we had access to, right? The only thing we had access to was like really hilariously bad, stupid marketing strategies on containers. And like, look, at least the ingredients, for the most part, they were relatively benign, right? There was like, I don't know, everyone was banging on about like just nitric oxide. And this was the days of proprietary blends and all this. And it was like, okay, yeah, there's like probably more caffeine in there than you think. Or there's a stimulant that we'll find out is probably not the safest. But that was kind of it, right? Like that was the extent to which you could consume misinformation in fitness. Is you were swindled $47 at a time out of some tub of pre-workout. Like there wasn't any other information to really, like, you know, forum information on the whole, from what I see on fitness right now, some of the stuff was like actually kind of smart because the people had to be invested into it. Because the very process of digesting the information or disseminating the information was like way more complex than it is now. Now it's you go on an app and you scroll and you just get inundated. So it's like in some ways I'm like really grateful that I wasn't growing up in this generation, but I think there's some takeaways that we could do, like a laundry list of, well, how is it that you appraise sources of information? Because we were just lucky. I had Luke, you had the old man, you had like the wrestling stud, and it was like, all right, this was we kind of fell ass backwards, and I still to this day, like I attribute where I am in the industry from where I started, which makes sense. Like Luke's, if you look at the level one, quick plug. Look at that on the YouTube channel. If you look at the level one manual, I literally, in every print we've ever run, Luke Bernatchez's name is right in the forward of the book. You can't see that. The camera didn't zoom in, but I swear it's there. And it's like, all right, you might not have access to Luke. You might not have access to Big Papa J. But like, how do you vet who you have access to? Like, what are your go-to like green lights and red flags when it comes to appraising content creators on the internet?
You had to add on the internet. Yeah, that's a really, I think it's a good question. It's a really important question for people to think about, because you kind of ran through it in that preamble, is that there's kind of 3 generations of training that are existing simultaneously, right? There's the one before us, like, you know, Papa J, like the golden age of bodybuilding, like Arnold. These people that were getting into it, and it was just all experience, right? They did it because they loved it, and they kind of figured it out as they went. And then there's our generation, where we got the benefit of their experience. We got to learn from them. And it was a time where there was starting to become more information, or more information was becoming available, right? Things that were primarily in print. Internet wasn't too huge. It kind of towards, as we developed in our training career, the internet became more and more prominent and more information became available. But even at the beginning, like when we were in high school and even in college, and when I was starting into personal training, it wasn't that readily available. There's a couple forums online, but it wasn't as popular as it is today. And then now we're in this generation where people are starting to come into fitness, whether that's training themselves or training other people, and the information is coming to them, right? So it's a more passive consumption of information. It's algorithm driven, or it's likes and shares, and it's something that it's just getting pushed into their consciousness. So it becomes really important, as you were saying, to be able to appraise the source of that information. And I think a lot of information that we consume on the internet, especially on social media, is a watered down version of much smarter people, or much more true principles that get just passed around. And every time, it's like the telephone game. Every time someone else shares that information, it's a little different take on it. Maybe it's not necessarily more or less correct, but it's just deviating further and further from the original source. And the context might not be provided there, which a lot of times it's not. On, we exist primarily on Instagram, but I'd say even worse than that is TikTok. TikTok fitness is a big thing right now, and I know nothing about it. I probably will never know. I hopefully will never know anything about it. But as far as I know, there's even less context there. So when I start to see these things, and we'll stick with social media for now, but if you are appraising content on the internet, I think it should be outside of social media first before you start to gain information from social media. Because social media, it's very short form, it's very informal, there's no context there, and it is algorithm driven. So people are not necessarily doing it for the intention of spreading good information. They're doing it for the intention of spreading their message. So a lot of times it's more entertainment based, or it's more provocative, or they have a take that's slightly different so that people will start to talk about it and it'll get pushed by the algorithm. So I don't think that's necessarily where you should be looking for your information. I think you should be looking, start on Google. That's where everyone fucking starts. Start on Google, find articles, appraise the source, like the .com versus .edu, .gov. That's like a way to look at things, but like actually looking at where that information is coming from, understanding the credentials of the person that's providing it, and understanding the structure in which they obtain that information. And what I'm kind of describing is research appraisal, but not necessarily in the terms of just reading research, but understanding credibility, understanding where did this information come from, how trustworthy is it, how applicable is it to the sample that I want to apply it to. So things like that are all going to inform the decision of how valuable that information is. And I don't think that exists on social media. I think something that does happen on social media is a lot of people find it's the people that they're following are probably within the same, they're training the same population as the person seeking the information. So that's one thing that can help to self-select. And I don't think following is a good gauge of this, because there's the things that are going to get people a good following on social media are going to be different than the things that get people results in the gym. And, I'm not saying this about any particular person, but it's, I know, but as we're looking at someone that's focused on gathering a following on social media, they're probably investing a lot of their time into gathering a following on social media. People that are focused on gaining clients and getting progress with their clients in the gym, they're probably not focused on gaining a large following on social media. So I don't think it's a good place, or a good, we'll say a good place. I don't think it's a good place to find the most valuable information, because it's a different playing field, right? Is if you're good at social media, you're good at social media. If you're good at training people, you're good at training people. So understanding the difference between those two and being able to see through production value, see through provocative content and understand when people are actually getting results. And that's going to be the type of person that you want to listen to as you're starting to appraise information or find more applicable information.
I think something that I would add to that, and it's sort of like an ethos around life, is like there's no such thing as bad ideas, just bad incentives. I think it's like a
I
Sam
like that.
Harris-ism. And I think that's really useful when we're looking to like, all right, what are some red flags? Well, first off, you need to filter for those flags, right? So not like for me, it's the burden of proof is always on the creator. It's always on the burden of, that you are guilty until proven innocent in this world. And that's just really growing up with a general mistrust of human beings across the board, which I would much rather that be my worldview starting point than having to learn the hard way that most people are just out for themselves. So I think that's number one, is like, well, can we dig down to the bedrock of the incentive of disseminating this information, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. The straightest line, right, is follow the money. Always just follow the money.
Always.
So, if we're seeing affiliations with, particular, not naming names is so tough. Like maybe I should even back up and say one of my other rules. It would be, is this person working towards the same goal as I am? Right.
I like that.
I see a lot of people, and I'll weave this into the intro, I'm sure, is talking about, who rules the roost right now in the education space as far as like credibility or respect are hyper academics that don't have the same goals as me. Right.
Right.
Like Stu Locke has a saying that says, live fast, die huge, leave a big coffin. I'm listening to that guy because that's aligned with my goals, right? Like I don't give a baker's fuck if I live to be 65. I don't care. I never thought I'd live to as long as you and I are currently living to, and we're a week apart, and we're both 33 years old, I guess 33 and a half now. So not only did I not think I would live this long, I also didn't think I would be able to do the things I've done in the time I've been alive. So like, I just want to keep doing, like, if, and this is not the case, at least to my understanding, if eating red meat knocks 20 years off my life, see you later. See you later. Wasn't meant to be.
Yep.
I'll leave a note. I'll leave a note and an empty fucking plate. Like, I don't give a fuck. It's just, and look, here's the thing. And I'm not saying that, everyone should like try and, gorge themselves to a large coffin and some sort of arthrosclerotic complication and cardiovascular disease. But like, hey, some people have really dumb goals. Look at speed walkers. People want to be the best in the world at speed walking. Okay, that's the dumbest thing in the world. You can literally, your sport can get beat by a Segway. Like, that is really dumb. So I don't think everyone, but no one bats an eye at that. That's the dumbest goal on the planet. And the things you have to do to be good at it make you look stupid, right? Everyone who speed walks all drink soy milk. Sorry, like that's just how it works. Competitive speed walking should be sponsored by soy milk. But like, what is my father always said, as long as you're not hurting nobody, I don't care what you do. And so drink all your soy milk and speed walk, and I'm gonna be over here doing my thing. So that's like number one for me. Before we even get into incentives, it's like, are you consuming information that is from a source that has a consistent value and goal set as you, right? Like right now, the hyper academic space that is just, going off the Drake effect of popular podcasters and just getting a lot of notoriety based off of that. It's like, look, great. If your goal is to genuinely just be now different between feeling and being. If your goal is to feel healthier, sure. If your goal is to be healthier, then you need to go down the nuance, because feeling healthy can be just enacting on some of these practices and feeling like you're making a conscious effort towards a goal. And that's, and feelings are very powerful. So it's cool if you can feel that. You can take the supplements they recommend. You can feel a part of the community that they foster and sort of cultivate around the content. I'm not bashing that. What I'm bashing is 16 to 20 to 30-year-old kids whose goal should be, and I say should because, look, human beings are insanely resilient. like insane, especially when you're 20. Like look at like a toddler. Like a toddler, you watch him fall over and you're like, it's just a rubber ball. Like it just bounces right back up. Now your fragility and mortality become more real as you get older, undoubtedly. But like, if you're a male between the age of 18 and 35, like, and you're thinking about the latter half of your life, or your goal is to live to 100 plus, like, look cool. All right. But I would say the majority of people out there who are taking fitness advice around supplementation, around training frequency, around exercise selection, execution, their goal is either one, ill-defined, or two, not in line with the way that they're actually going about it. Now, because what they're doing is they're looking at this pecking order that's being established by some of the criteria that you talked about, right? Like by the likes and views and engagement from people who are content creators, right? So if we look at, what is their incentive? It's like most of these people's incentive is to be right? Academia is proving things to be true, right? Or disproving things to be true. So, does that align with your goals? It's like, well, I would argue that most people, if you're going through what is like, it becomes more arduous to train consistently as you're older. That's why most people don't do it. Like when I was 16, 17, everyone kind of had a fair shake at working out because, again, we all had zero responsibilities. Then as, 18 years old, you got a couple buddies and knock up their girlfriend and you're like, well, I'll see you later. They're going to get fat now because they have a kid before they're 20. Like, all right, man, that guy used to be jacked and now he's a dad. And then like, in your 20s, we go to school. We saw it at grad school. Like unless you were really in it, it was hard. Me and you were the only ones that trained consistently through grad school. There was 50 kids in our class, all but were fairly athletic to start. And by the end of it, it was literally just me and you in the gym. I watched like, dude, seriously, like, we got by with our passing grades. I watch guys who came with like a very strong athletic background. Most chiropractors are just failed athletes that want to stay in sports and be relevant with like, hey, right here, that's me to a T.
Yeah.
And like I watch guys go from high level athletes to fucking potatoes in 4 years. Because it's like, yo, yeah, I understand. You got better grades than me. That's fine. It was a sacrifice I was willing to make because I love to train. But it's just like, then you get into it's all about setting the bar really high. Like I trained less during grad school than I did when I was 18 or 16 because that's all I did. I heeded no warnings from people who told me like, oh, you shouldn't train to failure, or you shouldn't train every day, or you shouldn't train multiple times a day. Jesus Christ. There was blocks where I would overreach and do 12 sessions a week. That's insane. But I could do it and I did it. But if you're 17 years old and you're doing 12 sessions a week, when you hit grad school at 23, your idea of tapered down is relative to a different starting point. If you're 17 and you're training 3 days a week on some full body split, and you're like deliberately training your tibialis anterior and you're doing bird dogs, it's like, dude, by the time you hit grad school, you're going to have, your calibration for like your work capacity or even your drive is just not going to be there. You're going to go down to almost zero. Yeah. The guy that trains 12 sessions a week, if he titrates down, he's probably titrating down to something like a normal dose of exercise, which for him is actually going to be beneficial because it's going to be relatively less stressful than what you're used to. So like, and I still do this in somewhat deliberate fashion when I can. Now, mind you, my schedule's been not so that I could do this in the last couple of years, but there was a time where my travel schedule wasn't as crazy. And if I knew I had a week where like I really couldn't train, but I had months where I was at home eating meals and sleeping as best I could, I would deliberately overreach for months, knowing that like when I got to this week it's going to go home for family and Christmas and the niece and nephew are there, and I'll probably only train 3-4 days a week. It's like, well, I can still make that part of a consistent progression. So it's like, and all of that started for me by just like, I found a guy who is in line with my goals. Luke Bernatchez is the most jacked dude I've ever met. And I was like, I want to be the most jacked dude I've ever met. What does Luke do? Well, he rolls a joint on the owner's manual of his Pontiac G6 and he takes Jack 3D before he trains. Great. I'll
Fuck
hand him
yeah.
the owner's manual and I'll sit quietly while he smokes his dub. And then I'll say nothing for 4 years until I decided that it was okay to talk to him. And I'll take my Jack 3D like a good boy and I'll be meth out of my head and I'll train 7 days a week and trying to keep up with this guy who's 7 years older than me. And that's what I did. And so for me, it's like, part of the appraisal process really starts with a self audit of like, what do you actually want out of this? And look, if you want to be right and maybe live longer, sure. I just couldn't imagine imagine dying young and listening to Huberman. Like imagine do you ask for your money back? Like how does that work? Do you send them a letter from your deathbed? Like, yo, dog, I'm 67 and I'm terminal. And I've got sun up my balls and I got Tongat Ali on deck, but I'm still dead. It's like what is you celebrate your 111th birthday like fucking Bilbo Baggins and you send him a letter? Like, do you invite him? Like, do you invite Huberman to your 111th birthday party? Because like, yo, thanks, man. I don't have fucking eyelashes anymore, but I'm still here. Can I tell you something? You know what I want for my 111th birthday? A fucking bullet through my brain. You think I want 100? You want 85 more years of this? Are you out of your goddamn mind, dude? I want off this ride. Yeah. So number one, in the appraisal process, appraise what the fuck you actually want. Number two, go out and find people who are consistently embodying and acting upon those goals and who maybe even accomplish those goals, right? Because there's a lot of different ways we can cut this fitness stuff, but I think a lot of times we default to this hierarchy of authority, or we have this sort of this subjection to authority. And everyone kind of falls in line because the talking heads that be say that this guy is the smartest guy. And it's like, no, like, I'm sure he's not the smartest guy. If I wanted the smartest guy, I wouldn't be in fitness. I'd be a polymath, right? I'd be a fucking theoretical physicist. Like, I don't give a fuck about the smartest guy in fitness. I care about the superlatives that exist within the subdomain of fitness itself. Give me the leanest guy. Give me the biggest guy. Give me the biggest, leanest guy. Give me the fastest guy. Give me the strongest guy. Give me the most agile guy. These are relevant metrics in the field that we're discussing. Smartest guy in fitness to me is the dumbest claim of all time. It's like about as dumb as the job title of bikini posing coach. Like, well, that doesn't exist, right? Like, what does that even mean? What is the smartest guy in fitness? It's like, it's not about being smart, right? So for me, it's just a matter of like, okay, if we're going to appraise, start internal and be like, what do you want? And then from there, and like these are high level stuff, I think we can look at like, what are red flags next, right? Like what would be like practices that we see where you're like, this person, based off of like the type of stuff they post or the frequency they post or how they post or the platform they post on, like what are some things where you see and you're like, oh no, this is cringe. This is probably not right. This is probably bad information without even knowing the information.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that I try not to spend my time in those corners of the internet because it just pisses me off. And I have enough things in my day-to-day life that piss me off. But I'll go with kind of off the tails of what you were just saying is there's a wisdom that comes with experience, right? People that have done it, they understand at least how to do it a way. And that way may not work for everyone. It may not be the best way, but it's a way, it's knowledge, and you're gaining some sort of experience from that you can then build off of. So that's where I would start, is that if someone's giving you advice on something they've never done themselves, that's a big fucking red flag. Like you said, a lot of the people, especially in the education space, in the biomechanics space, there's a lot of people that don't train or aren't strong or aren't big or don't look good or never got results that are telling a lot of people what to do. And the red flag for me is someone that doesn't or isn't willing to differentiate outwardly facing the difference between novelty and utility. And I understand that there's a utility to novelty at certain times, but it's the proportion of utility, right? So something that I've seen recreatively get people strong for my entire training career is a back squat. A back squat is kind of the fucking GOAT if you want to get strong. It's very accessible. It's very scalable. It's very loadable. It's very regressible, progressible. Back squats work. Strong people usually squat a lot of weight. If I were to put a post on my Instagram right now saying that, no one would give a fuck because they'd be like, yeah, we know. But you know what? There's a ton of fucking utility to a back squat. There's a ton of fucking people that do back squats on a weekly basis, maybe more than a weekly basis. But if I were to go on my Instagram and put some single leg, cable loaded, banded, fucking Joel Seedlecock post up, and it pisses a bunch of people off, and it's this very novel thing that has a very limited utility, people are going to say a bunch of shit about it, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and a lot of people are going to see it. It's this very novel thing that has very little utility. So things like that are a huge red flag for me, because you're getting people talking. You're building an audience around something that doesn't fucking matter, as opposed to just sticking to principles of exercises that actually work, have been proven to work, and have worked for, I don't know, since the beginning of exercise. So that's a big red flag for me, is people that are trying to start a conversation. We'll put that in a very general way, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whatever it is. People that are reaching to be different in the things that they're putting out there. Like one that I saw going around that I'm not as in the biomechanics social media space as probably a lot of people that listen to this podcast are. Yeah, exactly. Like I try and stay away from that corner of the internet, because there's a bunch of losers there. But there's one. Have you ever heard the term reach around?
I know.
Okay.
Of course not.
Anyways,
whatever is this reach around you speak of?
So there was this exercise going around called a press around, and it had a striking resemblance in the naming of it to a reach around. But it was like this unilateral press where people, I don't know, it's like on a cable stack, and it's supposed to be the best way to train your shortened pec. And I looked at it, and I'm like, okay, I understand. I understand what you're saying here. Yeah.
A reach around is actually the best way to train to like the dick. If anyone was wondering,
if you're trying to jerk off your buddy, give this a try.
Jesus Christ! Christ! In the bodybuilding world, those two things are not as far off as you'd want them to be, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. That's just.
My God.
Ooh, that's too close for comfort. Anyways, but there's people talking about this thing that there's no utility. Right? So if you go through the process in your mind of asking yourself, when you see whether it's an article, whether it's research, something that was funded, something that's coming from a more credible source, whether it's an article on the internet or a blog post or someone that you do think is credible, or a post on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, if you look at it and you say, all right, what's the message here? What are they trying to say? They're trying to say, this exercise does this. Okay. All right, I understand that. Then we need to take it a step further and say, okay, how does this apply? Where does this apply? Who does this apply to? Like, what's the utility of what their message is? And then from there, we also need to understand when it doesn't apply, right? Where does this rank in terms of effectiveness? And like you said, weighing it against your goals. If you have the goal of getting bigger, getting stronger, you're probably going to do exercises that are more loadable in most cases. And if you have this reach around that's not very loadable, I know I tried to say with the straight face.
I know. It's so good.
If you have this exercise that's not loadable, then you're kind of missing the mark, right? You're putting novelty in where there's a place for novelty, but it may not align with your goals. So you need to be a little bit more conscious in how you're discriminating against this information that you're appraising. So this could be something that just doesn't fit in your program, or it could be something I'm not saying it's a bad exercise. I'm saying come up with a different name for it, but it could be something that in terms of load management, yeah, there might be a utility here. But in terms of, being the best exercise for your shortened pec, like, who gives a shit? Like if you're trying to get big, there's probably such a minuscule trade-off in effectiveness between that and the next option It doesn't fucking matter. Like, that's not the thing that moves the needle. Like, how much weight are you putting on your hammer strength press or whatever else you're doing after that is probably going to have a bigger effect on the trainer's training session on a whole than, doing this thing that sounds like you're jerking someone off.
Yeah. I think the red flag for me and like the advice I give to people, because like, there's people intersecting with this information at various baseline levels of understanding, right? But I think
Yes.
everyone to a certain degree has a domain of expertise within a particular field outside of fitness, right? So, if I'm advising someone who has, like, I have some friends who are physicians. There's a guy who comes to mind, he's an ophthalmologist. He's like a depth over distance guy. I've met him a handful of times, got on great. He's fucking awesome. If we're ever in the same town, we always grab dinner together. But he's like he's an eye surgeon that does missionary work in like Africa and India. Like he's the coolest guy I've like ever met. But he doesn't have time. He doesn't have time to appraise fitness stuff. So he sends me stuff and goes, "What do you think about this?" And what I started doing when we have conversations and we sit down for dinner is like I try and bring it into his world and be like, okay, like let's look at the delivery of this content and think about something in your space. If someone was like, what is a frowned upon practice in your field, and how do the people who are disseminating this frowned upon practice, how do they distribute their information? What is their messaging? How do they tell the story around this thing that you find to be, either of like a poor moral ethic or, altogether just wrong? Like there's charlatans leave clues. And I think it's fascinating to me because fitness seems to have this like protective shield of like abs and fake tits over it, where like people just like just forget about, like Billy Mays selling you OxyClean at 12:30 in the morning. Yeah. It's like, dude, just because there's abs and tits doesn't like, how are you not seeing the delivery of this, right? We're talking about, so red flags that I often call on from a principles perspective that usually land when I start to think of analogous behaviors when played out in other arenas is like speaking in absolute terms. Right. Yeah. Downplaying a common practice. So for me, one of the things that outside of those two is being deliberately contrarian. Like if you have someone who's like there are so many fitness people who are like tantamount to flat earthers. And it's like, they're just saying I could tell you what a flat earther thinks about moon landings. I could tell you what a flat earther thinks about like, oh, the frogs are gay. Like I could tell you what, based off of this one data point, how this person thinks about everything. Because I just think, all right, what is the public contention of this topic? What is the accepted version? And then what is, even as asinine as it may be, what is the exact opposite of that? Someone who's a flat earther believes, they just operate from a different like a bizarro world paradigm. And one of the things that I see outside of the biggest, and I think the biggest, is speaking in absolutes, right? I find speaking in absolutes, and absolutes comes in a lot of different forms. Like when saying other people are wrong, I think is like a sign of hubris and a lack of humility that isn't consistent in any industry with someone who's like, a relative quote unquote expert, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like when, I actually detest there are two things, there's a lot of things I hate. What am I saying? I'm trying to narrow it down to two or three. I hate most things. I hate things on posting the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like I just, cause like, I gotta be honest, dog, when I see it posted, people who post it, you're pretty far left on the graph, homie. Like I've been around for a minute, lacking. And it's just this projection that I'm like this holier than thou type. I'm posting this because I've transcended or I've ascended to a point of like humility. It's like the fact that you're posting this is like the exact opposite of humility, dog. Like humility would be something akin to like self-deprecation, right? So Dunning-Kruger effect is one that it drives me nuts. Almost like when people use the word narrative. Look, all right, let me give you off color here real quick. If you're between the age of 25 and 35, let's say, and you find yourself using the word narrative in a conversation more than once every 6 months, get off YouTube, get a job, move out of your parents' house. Like if you're talking about the government and you don't have a library card, just don't use the word narrative. So the complete sidebar conversation, but you're welcome on that one. Stop using the word narrative. But it's like this idea that we're speaking in absolutes. We're demonizing. Like I've been doing this a while. You know me. I do this as often as a human being can do this and still
literally true. Yeah.
be alive. It's baffling to me, genuinely a social experiment. Now, I don't bite back. I don't do comments. I'll comment back if it's positive, but like people might not understand. And like people calling out, like will call me stupid, which is like, hey, everyone, it's cool. Like have your opinion, but be able to back it up. And they're so far from understanding the core concept that I'm putting out that their lack of understanding, they projected to me. I was like, look, I don't know how to explain this to you. Like, I mean that wholeheartedly. I do not know how to explain this to you because I'm trying. That's what this post is trying to do, and you don't understand. So it's like it's really troubling to me when we start to see like that type of behavior, defensive behavior, absolute language. Like these are things that, and look, so clearly you would see this if you were like, I don't know, if you were in the fucking real estate business. I've had this conversation, right? If you're in the real estate business and you're selling condos in a big city like Toronto, and you look at someone like, I don't know, a Grant Cardone or something like that, who, he's this rich guy, he's on these videos on private jets. But I kind of look at a guy like him and like, I don't know him from a hole in the wall. But I used to work with this guy who's kind of on his level financially. Like he's a billionaire, one of the largest real estate developers in North America. And I talked to him about it. And I was like, yo, PC, tell me a little bit about this cat. And he goes, what do you think, man? Like, you see me making videos on private jets and all this 10X bullshit? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, fuck. Yeah, obviously. Because like, you look at that as like, oh, this is hacky. This is salesy. Like this guy is not like a straight shooter. Now, mind you, this is the opinion of another person in his industry and everyone's allowed to have their own opinions. But I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, fuck. How come I couldn't see that? If I saw some douchebag doing that with like a rented Lamborghini in our industry or the equivalent of that, like, he's making some recipe for protein and oats. I was like, oh, I wonder how this is going to end. And he's like not wearing a shirt. I was like, that's the equivalent of that. Right. So like there's so many behavioral red flags that we can look at. And I think what will help if you're not as entrenched into the industry as like, say you or I, is think of the industries you're in and think of the behaviors consistent with those bad actors in your space and try and laterally apply those behaviors into the industry. Right. Then you can start to see like, the things that are deliberately targeting people at your relative skill or experience level in this industry, because the predatory behaviors of people who are going after the audience at the preliminary stages of your industry. Right. Like lateral thinking is such a fundamental concept. Like it is the bedrock of intelligence, in my opinion. And again, I think there's a veil of fake tits and abs that really makes it like we're just blinded by all the tits, and you're just like, oh God, like I forget everything, and it's like, yeah, I get it. But it's like at a certain point, you're just like, oh Jesus Christ, that's someone's fucking daughter out there, dog. Like you get to that level, and then the cloud just all out of your face, and then you can see like some of the behaviors. And like once that lands for a lot of people, because I think everyone who's, gainfully employed has to have a certain ability to critically think, we hope. But man, whether it's between the BCAAs and the plastic surgery, like people just lose the critical thing. Because I think what we're selling is so primal, right? Like we're selling like preferential breeding, right? That's like you're selling the idea of like being a suitable sexual partner. Like that's essentially dig down to the bedrock of what fitness really is. Like what the word fitness means. It's like survivability. And it's like at a certain point in our evolutionary biology, survivability was the thing that, now it's like if you're a fucking software engineer, I don't want to use that to be disparaging, but like how many times I was in an intersection behind a stalled out Porsche because some software engineer makes, $750 a year. And it's like, oh, like survivability is not necessarily what drives sexual selection, right? Like it's, the money is a part of that. Now, money is a component of survivability, but there's always this, and I've trained clients like this. I'm sure you've trained clients like this. Like I've trained extremely, extremely wealthy individuals that are in terrible shape. And when they're in the gym with me, I am the richest guy they know because I have the one thing that they can't buy, right? And so, but that's what they're after. Like, if it's 3 a.m. in a nightclub and there's someone who's in good shape and someone who's got the bag, it's really hard to see outside of the trappings of like, a Richard Mille watch or like a G-Wagon the valet stand. It's really hard to see who's, in that case, who has more fitness in the kind of sense of survivability. Like, it's probably the tie is going to go to the runner. Like it's going to go to the guy who's probably in better shape. Like that's unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not advocating for great decisions made at bars at 3 a.m, but like these are the battles that these guys are losing. And that I can tell you that because that's what I've been told. Why are you doing this? Why are you paying so much money to get you in shape? Because at 3 a.m, she goes home with a guy that looks like you. And I was like, okay, man, like dead set conversations I have had numerous occasions. Now, it's not me because I'm not in nightclubs at 3 a.m. and I prefer to, if I never am again in my life, it'll be too soon. But like that's like if you can understand some of the primal motivations behind people's fitness goals and you can acknowledge those, like those are inescapable. I'm not going to go full Freudian psychology, but like there are some very primal drives that get people into resistance training, especially those people who aren't that into it. Like I'm so far removed from my brain that's like a thing that I work out for. Like I enjoy the science of it. I enjoy the habit. I enjoy the way it makes me feel. If working out doesn't feel good, and guess what, for people who are not in good shape, you know what they dread about working out? Because it doesn't feel good. It takes a while for that to be the case. So what is their motivating factor? It's usually something very primal, something about like species fitness, not, cardiovascular fitness or anything like that. Like, am I fit in the ecosystem enough to be something that can survive and procreate? So it's like, okay, first acknowledge that. And once you be like, oh, okay, this is the veil of things that really makes my critical thinking process go off the fucking rails. Then all of a sudden the tits go away, right? The clouds clear, and then you can start to make better decisions. So that's for me is like, if you're at a point where you are relatively green in the industry and you're trying to get into working out, regardless of your starting point as far as your physical condition, think about the domain of expertise that you operate in. Think about the work that you go to every day. Think about the content that you consume and might consider yourself closer to an expert, and then laterally apply these red flags that are so ever apparent to you in the industry, and to reduce those core principles down and then cross apply it in the fitness space. Because it is wild to see how many smart people buy into really stupid concepts.
Yeah. I really like how you tied that full circle. It got a little weird there. There's a lot of tits. We brought it back. It landed.
Hey, that's fitness, dog. That's
Dude,
fitness.
It
Been
is.
doing this.
Yeah. And I guess if I had one thing to kind of end this on, I think my insight into appraisal is just not subscribing into any particular person or source or one thing for the system that they're selling or for the specifics of what they're saying. It's being able to see through the words and see through the production value and actually understanding the utility of it all, right? Because there's a lot of really dumb shit out there that as it's packaged and as it's sold, it's just dumb. Like, and I don't, whatever. I'll just go with it. Yeah. Like, an easy one, a low hanging fruit when it comes to this conversation is like the McGill Big Three. And I think this has been like, it's been a topic of conversation in at least our corner of the fitness space for a long time, because that's in the rehab space. That's where people they go to. You have a herniated disc, McGill Big Three. Okay. It doesn't hurt anymore. Go back to doing whatever you were doing. And it's not that that's a bad, there's not bad concepts there. There's not bad principles there, but there's bad application there. So understanding, being able to see through the actual system that's being sold to you and understanding the principles that lie behind it and why it might work in certain scenarios and why it might not work in other scenarios. And then being able to think independently and see, okay, if it works in this scenario, then I can pull this principle out and I can use that principle in X, Y, and Z scenarios and not just the one that's being sold to me. And that's the thing that I think I've learned the most in terms of appraising information through chiropractic school, because in chiropractic school, they sell you a lot of bullshit. A lot of it's really
Insane.
fucking dumb.
Insane. The
But
dumbest.
yeah, it's insane. Yeah, chiropractic theory. Are you I paid money to learn chiropractic theory.
You had to write a test on it, though.
Yo.
It was like level 3 was all that. Nuts.
No. Yeah, they don't even grade those. They just say, yeah, they're probably fine. But
Dude.
I know. But what it taught me was that, okay, if I take this information for face value, it's not very, I can't utilize it. There's not much use here. I can only use this on a person that fits this specific mold. But if I look at it from a more broad perspective and I look through and say, okay, why would a bird dog work on someone with a herniated disc? Maybe it's because I'm getting them to understand how to use their core to prevent rotation through the lumbar spine with some sort of demand. And I understand that. And then I see someone that maybe it's me, and they've had some disc issues in the lumbar and they can't feel their left foot. But you can take that principle and you can scale it to the task that they want to accomplish. If I want to put, 180 kilos over my head, well, a bird dog's not going to be the thing that gets me there. But maybe if I can do a dumbbell row with 80 kilos in my hand, maybe that's the thing that allows me to bridge that gap from just on the floor, on a hand and a knee, to 180 kilos over my head. So that's my biggest takeaway with information appraisal is don't take the information for face value. Look at the information, sit with it, and think why that might work in that specific scenario. And then from there, you can start to extrapolate out and you can be like, okay, what other scenarios can I use this principle and what variables need to change for it to be applicable to a specific person that has a different goal than, feeling better from an acute herniated disc, or insert problem here. And then you will have the solution if you can start to pull back the layers and understand the message that's being said, the principles of the message that's being said, and not just take it for the system that's being sold.
Yeah. So extract principles, ignore absolutes,
Yes.
lean away from people who use definitive language, align your goals with the people who you're following, make sure that they are consistent with, what you actually want to achieve, get clear on what you want to achieve. And I think ultimately to me, just don't follow old people. I think they're a plague on the fitness industry. They're the reason we have to make this episode. They're the reason you guys can't buy a home. They're the cause of inflation. They put you in your homes during COVID for 2 years. Don't give a share for RX Radio puts a boomer in a home. So without further ado, call your parents, cuss them out for inflation, and then put them in a nursing home, move into their house, sell it, and then use your money to buy supplements to get big and strong, because that's your way out. That's your saving grace. So if you like this episode and don't like old people, give us a share on Spotify. This is RX Radio, the antidote to boomer fitness. I think that's it for the week. Jay, anything to add before we...
I have nothing to add to that. Thanks
no,
for listening,
nailed it.
guys.
Really, really wrapped it well. We'll see you guys next week.
We'll see ya.